Hello my dears, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be doing a reaction. So I'm pretty sure by now you have heard people complaining about preferences and the conversation of, is a preference just a prejudice in disguise? I am going to listen to some videos on TikTok just to get an idea of the people who do think that preference is a prejudice, to see if maybe, I don't know, I'm always open-minded, right? So although I have my own personal opinions on this, I am open to hearing the perspectives of other people because they might have some points that I've not considered. So we're going to have a look at some of the videos and we'll talk about it.
Like, what makes you prefer another race over another?
Young makes a really good point, and I agree. Racial preferences are racist. I also want to add that most, if not all, of our preferences, or what we find attractive about other people, are not neutral or apolitical either. Much of what we deem desirable has been so largely determined and distorted by things like white supremacy, patriarchy, classism, colorism, etc. Even something that we may at first consider a neutral preference, like a woman saying, I prefer guys who are tall, is not really neutral once you start to interrogate it, as it seems related to like this infantilization and control of women. It's a patriarchal idea that men should be larger and thus more dominant than women. So yeah, that's just an example. I just think all desirability is political.
There's quite a lot to unpack there. Okay, so first of all, your attraction is political. There's no such thing as an apolitical attraction. So next time you see someone and you're like, wow, that booty fat, just remember that that's a political statement. So I've had some people express on my channel before that they take issue with the fact that I explain human behavior through biological means, like through evolutionary biology and stuff, because they feel like I'm basically saying that humans are essentially animals. And in response to those people who feel that way, my answer to that is, yeah, because human beings are animals. I honestly think that a contributing factor to the problems that we have today in society is that people now attribute things that we once understood to be biological to sociological constructs or social conditioning. The reality is human beings are animals. We are indeed animals, and many of the things that we do are indeed biological. Granted, some of them are social constructs, like for example, it's not natural for you to drive a car. It's not natural for you to, for example, wear dresses, etc. just because you're a woman. That's something that we've constructed and something that we've decided, correct. But something as basic as attraction is indeed biological. People don't choose what they're attracted to, because if they could, do you not think a lot of people's lives would be so much easier if they could just decide who they were attracted to or what they were attracted to? The amount of people who wouldn't have to deal with the consequences of their attractions if they could simply just change them. The idea that your attractions are political, in my opinion, sounds quite deranged, because no one is thinking about politics when they decide who they're attracted to. They simply know that when they look at certain people, their body reacts. And the idea that women are only attracted to tall men because of patriarchy and because society has taught us that we should be subordinate to men and should be small, etc., whatever, is completely false. The reason why women are predominantly attracted to tall men is because we've evolved to be attracted to the men who had the highest chances of ensuring our survival. And so these are men who typically were bigger than us, who were taller than us, who were strong, who also had certain personality traits. Your attractions are not rational. You cannot help who you're attracted to. And then when it comes to racial preferences, there are just certain features that people are attracted to that are more prevalent in certain races. And so naturally they end up going to that race more because that's where they find the things that they're attracted to. I'm not oblivious to the fact that there are going to be some people who avoid dating certain ethnicities or certain races because they have issues with them, or maybe they do hold racist views. But I do think that in 2022, this is a small minority of people. And even if those people do exist, I don't understand why anyone cares. Just go to the people who do find you attractive. Why do you spend energy on the ones who don't?
Okay, we're just gonna get into it. We're just gonna dive in. But first, I have a question. When you're dating, do you have a genital preference? Before you answer that, let's just talk about what a preference is real quick. A preference is to prefer one thing over another. So if you're one of those people who's just like completely repulsed by vagines or completely repulsed by peepees, that's a requirement. Disclaimer, either one is fine. If you have a preference or a requirement, that doesn't involve me. Whenever we have this discussion of preference, there's always those people who are like, LGBTs are just forcing me to like everything that I don't like. It's just, Oppression. No one's forcing you to do anything. If you don't like a TikTok, you can scroll. Anyways, I'm asking because I just had a really amazing discussion with Isaiah, one of my mutuals. I will tag him below. And we were talking about genital preferences. And I was saying how I saw a few trans people make videos saying that having a genital preference is inherently transphobic. They explained how it shows a preference for cis bodies, and I was like, okay, makes sense. This is not the topic of the video. We're not going to debate that. I am not trans. Isaiah is not trans. That is not our space. Don't even try it in the comments. It did get me thinking though. Are genital preferences learned?
Keep your children off of TikTok. Okay. Is it prejudice to have a genital preference? And are genital preferences learnt? I mean, if genital preferences could be learnt, then by that logic, all those gay conversion therapies that we used to do to people, they should have been successful, right? But we now know with hindsight that these unethical practices were not successful because you can't train someone to find certain genitalia attractive that they are not attracted to. To try and argue that genital preferences are problematic or that there's an issue with people having a attraction to certain genitalia and not having an attraction to other genitalia, how many times am I going to say the words genitalia? To try and argue that would be to basically erase the concept of sexuality. Because if people should just date people because of their soul and what goes on in between their legs should not even matter to you, like that is just you being discriminatory by even caring about that, then why would we even need the concept of sexuality, right? We should all just be dating each other regardless of that stuff, which now means that if you are a gay man, you're no longer simply a gay man, you are now a misogynist. It's not because you're simply just gay and you have a sexuality and because of your sexuality you're attracted to certain genitalia and not attracted to others. No, you're now a misogynist, right? Because genital preferences are inherently discriminatory and they're learnt as well. So you should just be able to unlearn that. And if you don't undo all those subconscious biases, then you are indeed a bigot. Do you hear how ridiculous that sounds? Genital preferences, essentially, is just a weirder way of saying sexuality. And sexuality, for the longest time, I thought we understood was not a choice. No one chooses their sexuality. That was what the original gay rights movement was all about, right? It was about allowing people to love whoever they love and they can't change what they're attracted to, so we should just allow them to freely be able to be together. And now you're undoing that by trying to say that, actually, no, genital preferences are definitely discriminatory. In fact, they're actually quite transphobic.
Let's talk about body preferences. I've heard a lot of talk like, oh, I don't hate fat people, but I'm not attracted to them, and I don't want to date them. It's just my preference. Maybe, in an ideal circumstance, in a world that was forever body neutral, and did not demonize fat people, that could be a preference. Maybe. But is there really such a thing as preference in a society that exclusively demonizes an option? Fat people are branded as disgusting, branded as something to be eliminated, unhygienic, lazy, XYZ, everything else. And we've received that messaging since we were born. Our culture is deeply rooted and entrenched in fat phobia. Chances are it's not just a preference, and you've just been taught to think fat people are gross.
No one's been taught to think that fat people are gross. I think, to be honest, most people don't really think that fat people are gross. They just acknowledge the fact that being fat is not healthy. If you are overweight, you are at risk of heart disease, high blood pressure, diabetes, cancers. And again, I'm gonna come back to it. Attraction is biological. And we are naturally programmed to be attracted to the people who have the best genetics and who are in optimum health. That's why if you see a really skinny person, you're also not attracted to that either, because it's not healthy. You're not attracted to people who are in poor health. If you saw a person who looked really sickly and unwell, you wouldn't think, sexy. And the fat women as well also prove themselves that attraction is biological, because these women will get on TikTok and say how fat is beautiful, fat is amazing, we should find fat sexy because if you don't, you're fat phobic. But yet they themselves don't pursue fat men. Lizzo's boyfriend right now is not fat, and before she got with him, she was pursuing Chris Evans. Captain America, muscular, in great shape Captain America. I have yet to see Lizzo shout out or try and shoot a shot with a guy who's around the same size as her. Tess Holliday's ex-husband, was he fat? No. A lot of these women who claim that fat is beautiful, fat is amazing, people should be accepting of fat bodies, and otherwise if they don't, they're fat phobic, don't date fat men themselves. They say this stuff because they want people to find them attractive, because the people who they're trying to pursue, who they're attracted to, aren't attracted to them for the same reasons that they're not attracted to fat men. But of course, it's a double standard though, isn't it? They are okay to not find fat men attractive, but it's not okay for men to find them unattractive. I also find it really interesting how we decided which dating preferences were acceptable and unacceptable. Because, for example, even though we understand why women are attracted to tall men, I do find it interesting how there's no term for that. You know, if a man's not attracted to a fat woman, then he's fatphobic. But there's no terminology to describe a woman who's not attracted to short men. There's no term such as short man phobia or short king phobia. Why is that? I also find it interesting how it'd be perfectly acceptable for a woman to say that she wouldn't date a guy who was broke. I mean, we even have songs about it, right? Like, I don't want no scrubs. Like, that was perfectly acceptable. No one considered how that would be offensive to men who were broke. Now, granted, there would be some men who would call her a gold digger, etc. But let's be honest. If a woman got on social media and said that she only wants to date successful men, she would face far less backlash compared to a man who went on social media and said he only wants to date women who are a size 8. And I do find that rather interesting. Honestly, at the end of the day, when it comes to this whole preferences thing, I think that people have every right to decide who they will and won't exclude from their dating pool. Discrimination is perfectly acceptable when it comes to dating, because you can't in one breath say you believe that people have the right to consent and have the right to decide who they will and won't allow access to their bodies, while simultaneously shaming them when they exert that right of consent by deciding who they will and won't allow access to their bodies. I also do have some compassion for these people though, because I can understand how frustrating and demoralizing it can be when you know that you want to find love and you're constantly experiencing rejection. At the end of the day, they just want to have love and they want to have intimacy, which is perfectly fine, but you don't get that by just simply shaming people and trying to guilt trip them into wanting you. If you are a bigger person and you're struggling to date because of your weight, you do have the option to lose the weight. I know that's not an acceptable thing to say nowadays, but if you don't like your outcomes, then you need to change your actions so that you can have better outcomes. Another topic that I would like to bring to light is that maybe sometimes it's not the fact that you are trans or the fact that you are fat or the fact that you are a certain ethnicity. It could also sometimes just be your personality, because I see plenty of people of all different ethnicities in happy relationships, so their race has not stopped them from finding someone to love, so I don't see why it should stop anyone else. I see trans people in happy relationships, and the ones I follow, they're all in pretty happy relationships, but they're also very down to earth as well. They're not activist types, and they're not the type of people who are constantly screaming that this is transphobic and this is transphobic. They're just living their lives. So sometimes it might just be that your personality isn't that great to be around. It is definitely something to consider, because sometimes I do think that we lean on our identities, like the fact that we're black or Asian or trans or fat, as an explanation for absolutely everything, when sometimes that's not the reason why people don't want to be around you. But getting on TikTok and accusing those who aren't attracted to you of being some kind of ism or some kind of phobic is not exactly going to make you more desirable, especially because it just makes you come across as entitled and arrogant, because none of us are entitled to attraction. No one owes you attraction. We don't have a right to scold people for not finding us attractive. You simply just have to go for the people who do find you attractive and leave the ones who don't find you attractive alone. No one has a right to be horrible to you or be disrespectful to you because of your body size, your race, your height, etc. Those things are terrible, and if someone was to treat you terribly based on those things, that would be a bad thing. But someone not wanting to date you is not oppression, and they have full right to decide that they don't want to date you. I do think we are living in a time where people are becoming very, very entitled, and it is a problem because you're not owed anything. Like, none of us are owed anything. And that's just my opinion on this. I think this whole idea of preferences being prejudice, in my opinion, is just complete entitlement, and it doesn't make any sense. That being said, I also think that people shouldn't terrorize people with their preferences. Like, if there are certain people that you're not attracted to, that's fine, but you don't have to go on social media and talk non-stop about it and constantly put down the people you don't find attractive. There's absolutely no need for that, because you're just being obnoxious for the sake of being obnoxious at that point. If you're not attracted to certain groups of people, or you're not attracted to certain body types, or you're not attracted to certain races, that's absolutely fine, but don't harass people with it. But simply having a preference or having a dating exclusion, I think you have full right to do that, because at the end of the day, consent matters. So if someone comes up to you and says, hey, I think it's wrong that you have this preference and that preference and that preference, just simply say to them, listen, I have a right to consent. and I don't consent to that person. But that's it for this video. I would like to know what your thoughts are on dating preferences. Do you think that they're okay? Do you think that they're unacceptable? Let me know in the comments. If you think they're unacceptable, you would have to give me a very compelling argument as to how you justify that while simultaneously valuing consent, because I just don't see how those two things can coexist. But it will be interesting to see anyway. I do enjoy reading your comments. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, do like and subscribe. I am also on Instagram, and I also make music on Spotify. I will put links to these in my description box. Thank you very much for giving me your time today, and I will see you on Sunday.